咁我請議員介紹自己咧，第一趟提問嘅時候，因為唔好意思咧，我都唔記得盧偉國議員係邊個功能組別，抱歉。哦 ，OK。Good morning. Yes, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this informal meeting. Please note that it's only an informal meeting that between the expert group and the members of the Environmental Affairs panel. Even though the setting could look like a bit formal, but it is because of the sound system that we could have here and get everybody well heard and clearly understood by all attendants of this informal meeting that we have this setting. And let me introduce our guests to the members of the committee. And excuse me if I cannot pronounce your name right because I'm not an expert in the Northern European language. So on the first row from the right-hand side is Dr. Lee Potts from the ECOM, the technical manager of energy, and then Mr. Herman Huisman, the senior advisor of the RWS Environment of Netherlands, then Mr. Peter Simons, the technical director of, maybe you could help me to pronounce the name of your organization much better than I do.
It's Afval Energiebedrijf. It's the waste and energy company of the city of Amsterdam.
Okay, the latter part is much easier for me.
Thought so.
And then on the second row is Professor Nicholas Families, Waste to Energy Research and the Technology Council of USA. And of course, Mr. Elvis Aud, our Assistant Director of Environmental Protection Department. And I'll leave members of our panel to introduce themselves when they raise their question. So first of all, could our expert friends share with us the insight and the good practices of the incineration? And
yes. In the Netherlands, we have 12 waste-to-energy plants with a total capacity of 7.3 million tons a year. And all these waste-to-energy plants meet the requirements of the European Waste Framework Directive. So they're all called recovery facilities because they're all high-efficient facilities. There is a very stringent legislation in the Netherlands for these facilities, and this regulation stems from 1989. At that time, we had problems with polluting waste-to-energy facilities, and we closed down 5 of them. Of these facilities, and we issued new regulations, and these regulations are still in place, and these are the same regulations the EU adopted in the Waste Incineration Directive. But nowadays there is an IPPC directive of the European Union, and there are BREF documents, best reference documents, based on the best available technologies. So the facilities in Europe, they are all meeting the highest standards, and they need to have the highest standards, otherwise they do not get licenses. And these facilities in the Netherlands, they have been established in the last, so they're all modernized or newly established in the last, say, about 20 years. And For the latest facilities, there's no public opposition for these facilities. So the one in Amsterdam, but they can explain themselves. The extension was about 50%, more than 50%, has been done without any lawsuits, without any opposition, because of the good performance of these facilities. So citizens are not even aware that these facilities are in their neighborhoods. They're close to the cities. And that's the case with most of our facilities. They have been realized without any objections, without lawsuits, because they are performing well. They have a very transparent operation. They are very open about their operations, about the emissions and so on, if available. So waste to energy is no issue, and we even import waste from a lot of countries, from UK, for instance, from Italy, Naples, which has a bad situation regarding waste management. We import the waste, and it's been incinerated in the Netherlands, and there's even no objection of citizens for these imports. So it's of there is no political debate about these facilities. These are well-running and well-performing facilities. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Very enviable when there's no court case and no complaint from the residents. And let me catch up a little bit and introduce to everybody our simultaneous interpretation system. And on every booth you have an earpiece like this, and you could tune to the simultaneous interpretation. And from English to Cantonese is channel 1, and with original language on the floor is channel 0, so that everybody could make use of our SI service. So who will be the next guest to share with us the good practices and expertise? Yes, Mr. Peter Simons.
Yes, Herman mentioned already the situation in Amsterdam. Indeed, when we opened our last facility, our last plant in 2007, it went without any complaint. It's maybe also good to tell you what our approach is in this, because we have a long history of waste to energy in Amsterdam, but for the last plant we had a very open communication with all the stakeholders, and that are the NGOs, also the environmental department who has to give the permit. And we also, when we designed the plant, we also showed them our plans, and we said, okay, this is the standard now, but we think we can do better. We can go for lower emissions, we can go for higher efficiency, but also, and that's important for the city of Amsterdam, because they had to finance the plant in Amsterdam. We said it will bring lower cost to the citizen of Amsterdam. And we make a profit also. The importing of waste from the UK makes that is also necessary for our economical and we make a profit with this plant, and this profit goes to the city of Amsterdam, and then the city of Amsterdam can decide they can decide to lower the cost for the citizen of Amsterdam for their waste disposal. Another thing is, we never talk about the emissions is not a discussion point. In the Netherlands, we are more discussing about other items, and that is the climate, for example. And you see that our installation Amsterdam has its climate targets. They want to reduce 40% of the CO2 relative to 1990. And our plant can make a very big contribution to that, because we are delivering sustainable energy, renewable energy, but also we changed the energy infrastructure in Amsterdam from gas to district heating, for example, and we also look at a steam network in the harbor area where we so that makes also a very large contribution to the energy and climate targets of the city of Amsterdam.
Thank you, Mr. Simos. And Dr. Lee Posh or Professor Family? Yes, Professor.
Thank you. I am with Columbia University in the city of New York. We're very proud of that university. It has about 62 Nobel laureates over the years. And we're also proud of the work we're doing because we're working on waste management. We're one of the few universities in the world, research centers dedicated to waste management. And in the past 15 years, we have studied all means of waste management in many countries. So specifically now about this, about Hong Kong. Hong Kong, the hierarchy of waste management requires that first people do as much recycling, composting as possible. And Hong Kong seems to be doing very well there. It's 48% recycling. But then there's 3.3 million tons of wastes which are landfilled. I looked one up of those landfills, Nant, in the Northern Territories. It takes 2,700 a day. So the project the project which is discussed or proposed is for 1 million tons. So if it's done, it would leave 2.3 million tons still to be landfilled. And really that's the only choice for post-recycling waste, either landfilling or waste to energy. So there is a 2.3 million tons, they still have to worry about it. What this 1 million tons, if it goes through, will do is, first of all, it would generate something like 600,000 megawatt hours per year, which is enough for about 103,000 citizens of Hong Kong. The electricity, it's 103,000. It will also reduce the greenhouse gases of Hong Kong by 1 million tons. And also, looking at the current rate of landfilling, in the landfill I mentioned, it would conserve about 20,000 square meters per year of landfill space. So there is a lot of good things for that project. And usually what stops these projects, in our experience, is the money, is the funding. Is the gross domestic product per capita. But Hong Kong is very well there. It's about $50,000 per ton on parity. So it seems to be like a confluence of good factors for such a plant. So I'm a bit surprised that there is so much discussion and apparently going for years.
Well, Hong Kong is a very unique city, definitely. Dr. Lee Potts?
I work with AECOM, who are acting as advisors working with the EPD, but I'll explain a little bit what's going on in the UK because I think it kind of sets some kind of context. In the United Kingdom, we have 18 energy from waste plants, and there are a number under construction at the moment. That's partly because the UK has to meet quite stringent targets around what's called the Landfill Directive in terms of diverting waste away from landfill. So in the next 3 or 4 years, there'll be probably 24 energy from waste plants. They're sized in probably, on average, probably around 150 to 200,000 tonnes per year per plant, to give you a kind of idea of the size. We do have opposition, so we do get opposition. That's probably a legacy thing because 20 years ago, energy from waste plants weren't very clean. They didn't perform very well. Nowadays, the thing it's changed quite considerably with the introduction of the Waste Incineration Directive. The standards are very strict with the environmental regulations in terms of permitting. That's very strict, close control through the Environment Agency in the United Kingdom. They closely control the management of these facilities, working with the operators. So I think what's happening is where there is opposition, it's worked through with an education program, talking to people, kind of removing misinformation. It's a hard process at certain places within the United Kingdom. In other places, it's very straightforward and plans facilities get built very easily, but it just varies across the country. So that's the kind of the situation for us. But what will happen eventually is probably around 30 to 35% of the MSW of the United Kingdom will go to energy from waste plants, and we will have around 50% recycling, and then the rest will be landfill. And that's quite a considerable change because 15 years ago, 95% went to landfill and 5% was recycled. So within 15 to 20 years, there's quite a dramatic change in waste management within the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Okay.
And let me extend our welcome to the Professor Umberto Arena from the Specialist Group on Waste to Energy from the Second University of Naples, Italy. And we just finished the first round of the sharing of experiences and good practices from our 4 experts from the Netherlands, UK, and United States. Would the Professor Arena want to take your time to tell us the comment on the incineration and other types of waste management?
Yes, briefly, my first worrying is that it's important to understand that the zero waste solution could be a dramatic decision or not decision for Hong Kong as for other countries. I come from Naples, where for a long period, about 12 years, we suffered a dramatic situation due to the insistence to find a zero waste approach. Zero waste only represents a desirable approach, a trend on which all waste management strategies should be based, but cannot become a strategy. If as in some cases, some people utilize zero waste as a sort of management system, the only results could be an incredible problem for all the territory. We now have in the Naples area, also now, I mean 6 years after the solution of the waste emergency, 200 hills of waste bales accumulated in 200 pyramids. I mean 6.5 million tons of waste that still wait to be burned. So in my experience, zero waste several times means zero decision. Where as in your country, the organization of recycling chain is always gone. The biological treatment can be activated. It is necessary to complete the strategy with the thermal treatment. After you have to decide which kind of thermal treatment, but this depends on the site-specific exigence and your requirements. And if you need, as Professor Temlis told a few minutes before, a very large plant, probably the moving rate combustion solution is the best one because it's a very well proven, very well designed and management criteria known and utilized criteria. A good possibility to make a very exact prediction of cost, investment cost and operating cost. And also enough return of investment due to the size of the plant and the high electric efficiency. A lot of things could be if you need to make a smaller plant where you would like to highlight just the reduction of solid residues. In this case, the Japanese experience in some gasification process as the direct melting system could be useful. This is my first impression.
Thank you. 喺度咧就記錄在案先。因為咧，我相信無論係擴展堆填區或者係做焚化設施咧，香港社會都會有好多不同嘅意見。咁今日係一個非正式會議，就係同專家們，因為佢哋5月5號到8號啱啱嚟到香港，所以我哋安排咗呢個非正式會議嘅會面。咁咧， 及後，即係如果我哋要再傾堆填區嘅擴建或者係政府嚟申請做焚化設施嘅時候呢，我哋係一定會邀請環保團體同埋居民呢嚟俾翻充足嘅時間，俾各方去講翻佢哋意見。所以喺呢度就真係要記錄在案。咁啊，大家知道呢，如果各位係同環保團體或者係居民組織係有聯繫嘅呢，亦都請話翻俾佢哋聽。即係我哋唔係淨係聽一方專家嘅意見，咁呢度要講翻清楚啊。咁就我請委員提問啦。係盧偉國議員。
This is WK Low. I represent engineers from the Engineering Functional Constituency. As an engineer, because I have some knowledge of the modern incineration technology, and I visited quite a number of plants in Japan. Well, these advanced thermal treatment, even dioxin completely decomposed, according to what I heard from them. I would like to, as well, since we have two experts from Netherlands, may I ask, usually what is the capacity of the plant? Maybe you have different sizes. What are the most common size of the incineration plant in your country? And if I ask what is the most economical size, then what will be your answer? And I heard that actually there's no public opposition at all. That means in your country, these sort of incineration plant turning waste into energy is very well accepted by the citizen. In Hong Kong, in the old days, we have plant, of course, not the same kind of advanced technology as we have today. And they're giving out smoke every day. Therefore, maybe in the concept of some old citizens in Hong Kong, they still have that picture, of those old incineration plants. The modern plants are, of course, very different. But certainly, this is a good opportunity to hear from the expert group this morning. Thank you.
Yeah. Expert from Netherlands.
Yes, I already mentioned we have 12 facilities. The smallest one is 230 kilotons. 230. 230 kilotons per year. And the largest one is from my neighbor. It's about 1.4 million tons a year. So there's a big range. There is an economy of scale. Especially due to, but I think Peter can explain more of that. But the economic size varies. But what's also very important about the economy of these facilities is whether you have an outlet for your steam and electricity. And that's one of the main elements in, the economy of these facilities. Most of them are next to either industrial areas or urban areas, cities, where the steam of these facilities is transported in steam networks in the city for central heating systems or city heating systems, and of course electricity. But so the economy is not just based on the size of these facilities, but also about how to make an economic use of the heat and the steam and and electricity. So these are determining elements, but maybe Peter can explain more about their facility.
Yes, I can. Yes, what Herman said, we, in fact, now we have the largest plant in the world with 1.4 million tons a year. And also we co-incinerate also 100,000 tons of sewage sludge. That's from our neighbor next door. That's the wastewater treatment plant. So in total, we have a capacity, if you calculate it in a day, we talk about 4,400 tons per day. We also had a discussion when we started designing this plant, what should be the optimal size. And what you can see if you look at all the plants that have been recently built is that the larger plant you build, the lower cost you have. That is just a matter of specific investment cost. A plant twice as large doesn't cost twice the price. So you see a lot of smaller installations. They have very high investment costs. They go up to maybe 800 or 1,000 euros per ton capacity per year. That's the calculation we make. And in our case, you talk about the half of it, 500 euro per ton per year. So there is a big economy of scale. Also, when you look at it, if you look at, for example, what Herman mentioned, the energy contracts we have, we produce around 1 million megawatt hours of electricity. That's 1% of the total usage of the Netherlands. So we are also an important power producer. We have better contracts than when you have very small installation, because you bring a lot of volume to the market. So that's very important. And of course, delivery of heat to district heating or steam networks, that works even better. That for the economy. But the investment of these installations, that's the big part of the cost for waste to energy plants.
Any other question from members?
Thanks. I just want to ask, in the early part of the speech, saying that the incinerator in Netherlands, has good performance. Can you explain more on, what do you mean by good performance, in what aspects? On the other hand, I would like to know, would there be any other measures? Because, a lot of time when we are talking about using the incinerator, or we are talking about the waste management strategies, it will be a combination of both, incinerating and also, waste reductions and other, measures. So I just want to know, how that different parts or different strategies, can form a mix to have, a comprehensive, waste management schemes. At the same time, if one part say reduction of waste can achieve, a good level of standards, then, you may come to, another problems that, there may not be enough, waste for you to incinerate. So, how can you, manage, the sort of, opposite, direction or, opposite, goals, to assure that, the investment and also the policy, the waste management policy, will have a good mix for the countries.
They import waste from other countries.
Yeah, I know that, but I just want to know, the key issues on here.
Right, please.
I leave the question about good performance to Peter, but about the waste management strategies. The Netherlands has 80% recycling of the waste. So we produce 60 million tons. 80% is recycled. It's material recycling. So the metals and all these and organics and so on is really recycled. So 80% recycling, 17% waste to energy, and we have about 2% of landfilling, even less than 2% of landfilling. So landfilling used to be, also in the Netherlands, of course, the main way of treatment of the waste. Nowadays it's only of less than 2%. So 1.2 million tons of waste is landfilled in about 20 landfills, but it's not a very profitable business anymore. The strategies. The way we operated was by making landfilling the most expensive way of treatment. It's also, but Mr. Lee can explain it. We introduced a landfill tax in 1995. We gradually increased it, like the UK does. And in 2012, we revoked the landfill tax, because no landfill, or hardly any waste was landfilled, and the income for the Treasury Department was about zero. and they were afraid that the old landfills would be excavated for incineration, and that they had to pay, the Treasury Department had to pay for the waste which had been landfilled. So this has been revoked. So at the moment, we only have a landfill ban of about 40 waste streams, no landfill tax anymore, because we reached the level we wanted to. So recycling and reuse and prevention, of course, those are the targets, and also in the European Framework Directive, it's incorporated, this waste hierarchy, in the European Framework Directive. And we do have an excess capacity for incineration at this moment. This was caused because the government in 2003 decided to skip the planning. We used to have a planning of waste-to-energy facilities in order to avoid an excess capacity. But in 2003, this was liberalized. So anybody who wants to start a facility, they're free to do it as long as they meet the requirements for land use and for the emissions, and so they can acquire a license. So we have an excess capacity, but this it's completely the risk of the owners of this plant. So if they're not able to have sufficient waste, well, they will maybe go broke. So it's their risk. It's not supported by the government anymore. It used to be. In the period of planning, we supported these facilities. Nowadays, it's free markets, so we don't support them. And they are allowed to import the waste as long as they meet the requirements of a recovery facility. So the R1 criterion of the European Framework Directive. So we have a mix of strategies. Waste to energy is an important one because we don't want to landfill waste, or we want to reduce the amounts and divert as much as possible. The Netherlands is not suitable for landfilling. The Netherlands is like Hong Kong, a very densely populated country. We have limited space and we don't want to use it for landfilling. So waste to energy is an important element, and if you look at the statistics of the EU, EU member states who have a large incineration capacity also have high recycling rates, while countries who have low incineration rates have also high landfill and low recycling rates. And that's not coincidence, it's because when you say waste to energy is the minimum standard for treating municipal solid waste, you have also a minimum price, gate fee for that. And at that time, recycling pays. So many activities for recycling are cheaper than waste to energy or the landfilling with high landfill taxes. But at the moment, as I said, we do not have a tax anymore. It's just landfill bans, and there is an enormous economic space for recycling activities, and that's our strategy.
Members?
I just want to follow say, because it's interesting for me to hear that say, we can make incinerating be a business. Am I wrong in? Be a business, because say you introduce a market mechanism, and you found some way to get private investor to build incinerator. So can you tell me something? How can you? Because in Hong Kong, we are talking about that must be a government project to do incinerating, and how can we achieve from our thinking then well, to do incinerating, it must be a government project, and then you tell me we can make it as a business, and then that interests me a lot. Yeah. Can you tell me something more about that?
Well, the main instrument in that used to be the landfill tax.
Yes.
Because we had a landfill tax. The highest level we reached was 110 euros a ton landfill tax. So that was excluding the operational costs, so landfilling would be about 130 euros a ton. So at that time, waste-to-energy is very profitable because waste-to-energy plants in the Netherlands, the newest contracts are being signed at about 60 euros a ton for waste-to-energy. And they need to have, but I think Peter can go more in detail about that. You need to have good contracts for electricity and you need to have good contracts for your steam. Otherwise you can't pay it. So I think the facility in Amsterdam, the newest one, will have about half of the income, close to half of the income from the energy yield, and the other income is from the gate fee. So that's the model. Either to have high landfill taxes, landfill costs, by that incineration is competitive, or and the way it's done in the Netherlands nowadays is have a landfill ban. So you're not allowed to landfill, so you have to look for other outlets. The only option for residual waste is waste-to-energy.
And Mr. Simos, you have anything to tell our members?
Yes. There was also the question about performance earlier. Shall I start with this one? Yeah, you wanted to know where we are, where we perform very, very good. There are two, or maybe three things to mention, because that's the efficiency, that are the emissions, and the materials that we also recover from our process. First, what we are famous on is because we talk about high efficiency waste-to-energy plant. Our newest plant has an electrical efficiency of over 30%. So and that means that from each ton of waste that we get into our plant, we can produce around 850 kilowatt hours of electricity. And yeah, that's much higher than the average in Europe, because the efficiency, when you calculate it, is around between 15 and 20%. Newer plants that build now have 25% efficiency. So that is a very big step that we made. And even last year, the figures from last year, 2012, we reached an average efficiency of 31.2%, and that's the net efficiency, so the electricity that we put on the grid. Materials, because we said this new lines are built for recovery, not only as for energy, but also from materials. Because when you look at our process, we also have materials that come out of our plant. You talk about bottom ash, you talk about fly ash, and all these materials. And there we also said we want to make sure that we can reuse all these materials as much as possible. And what you see is what we achieve is that only 1% of the materials coming out of this plant we cannot reuse. All the other materials are reused in other processes. The main stream, that's bottom ash, that's 20% of what's going in, is also coming out, because that's inert material, and that are metals, that are stone and glass and sand. They are all reused. The mainstream is road construction materials, but also we have now quite advanced sorting after incineration installations to get more metals, and also the non-ferrous metals, that are the valuable metals, out of this stream. So last year we also got around 30,000 tons of these metals back from the waste. So that's also, that's where we achieve very, very well. And then, of course, the emissions. And that's also good to mention, what I started with is that we said, okay, we want to do it better. And we also put that more or less in the tender documents for the new plant. When we made the design for the plant, we brought we put it in tender documents. We didn't say to the market, who had to supply the flue gas systems, this is the waste incineration directive, these are the requirements from the EU or the Netherlands. No, we said we are used to, these are our standards, this is what we operate for the last 20 years. They are very low, And these are your guarantee levels. You have to make sure that you are lower than that, otherwise we don't choose you as the contractor for these systems. So it was quite some discussions with all the suppliers of the materials, but they agreed and they also succeeded again to go even lower. So yeah, that was also for Amsterdam very important that we said we want to go lower. That's about performance. A little bit about the cost price. I can make a small breakdown what Herman already said. We had last year a turnover of 180 million euros, and when you look at it, it's 120 million euros is coming from the gate fee, but 50 million euros is coming from the sales of electricity and heat, and then 10 million euros is for the materials that we see that the trend is that especially that in the Netherlands, because of this tendering and this overcapacity, is that the gate fee is dropping a little bit, but you see also that the materials are growing. The cost price of these materials are rapidly increasing, so that compensates more or less. So there's also for us a lot of effort to get more materials from our processes back to optimize also our economic performance.
Yeah. Professor Arena?
Yes, I would like just to confirm some of the observations made so far. In particular, I believe that you highlighted the importance of the communication with the people in order to obtain a possible acceptation of the plant. What is really important is to organize a correct, continuous and transparent information. And one of the aspects that you could use is that Peter just mentioned. I mean about the possibility to go lower than the existing limits. For instance, in Acerra, the plant close to Naples, which is a very large plant, 700 kilotons per year, that has a very large availability, more than 90%, and very good electrical efficiency, 28%, similar to that in Netherlands. The limits for Italian limits for any emission, which are the lowest in the world because of that of the European community, has been reduced for a factor of 4. For instance, dioxin limits is not, the legal limit is not 0.1, but 0.025. The same for heavy metals and the same for nanoparticles. The results of the plant in these 2 years is very, very lower than this. I mean, for dioxin is 0.008. I mean, another factor of 4 lower than the accepted limit. So the people verified that in 3 years there has been no overcoming of the limits in any days. And now the situation is strange because there are some environmental opposition against a new plant, but the people that live close to the plant want to make it larger because they saw that the plant work and the environmental and pollution was absolutely not absolutely negligible. In this framework, I would like to suggest to you another important aspect that related to the correct waste management planning. I prepared personally the waste management for the Campania region, which is a region with Naples city and some other very crowded city. That has been accepted by European Community 2 years ago. It's important, I indicated a separation collection rate of 50%. Please take in mind that the recycling rate is a thing, separation collection rate is another thing. because I can have a rate for separate collection, but the amount of material that is effectively recycled is absolutely lower. I mean 20 or 30% less. That's important because if you have 100 kilograms of waste and if you have 50 kilograms of separate collection, you have not only 50 kilograms to treat by thermal treatment or by landfilling, because you have to consider also the residues of recycling chain that in general, in average in Europe, are between 20 and 28%. So if you have a separate collection rate of 50%, you need probably to have a plant for 75%, 70 kilograms of each 100 kilograms. I don't know if it's clear. That's important because when I prepared the waste management planning for Naples area, I proposed this situation, but has not been accepted by the local government, but by the European community, yes. Now the situation is that the plant in Naples works very well, 2,000 tons per day, but even though the separate collection in average in Campania is more than 42%, one of the highest in Italy, the residues of recycling chain and the other material imposes the necessity to move about 1,000 tons per day outside of Italy to burn it. So this confirmed the necessity of an adequate waste management planning for the size of the plant. That's important as our experience. I would like to suggest you to take it into account.
Thank you. Dr. Kenneth Chen.
To Hong Kong to advise on waste management and waste to energy facilities and so on. I work at Baptist University. Suppose you're attending that conference, so thank you very much. I was unable to attend the conference given my work here. Anyway, good to see you. A number of questions here. Obviously, you noticed that in Hong Kong we're dealing with a very serious problem, which is the NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard syndrome. What you see as business opportunities turn out to be something socially undesirable to many neighborhoods in Hong Kong. Now, of course, on the one hand, it's great to hear that people in the Netherlands or people in different parts of the world are welcoming these facilities and seeing them as geese that will lay golden eggs or something like that, but not in the case of Hong Kong. Just wondering what exactly it took to convince the people to buy in. More specifically, as a political scientist by training, I wonder whether people are responding more to performance data, science and technology, or people responding more to incentives, particularly financial incentives. They're telling them that, hey, your bills will be cut by 20%, or your taxes will be cut by 30%, or the local government will stop charging you people on facilities, tennis courts, swimming pools, and these sort of things. What exactly are people responding to more effectively in order to sort of accept that sort of facilities, given the high standards that you've been talking about? I'm not questioning the science and technology. I'm just wondering how we convince people to buy in such ideas. And my second question is with the respective, perhaps, roles and expectations from your perspective regarding the European Union, the national governments, as well as the regional authorities, because I understand the EU is pretty complicated, involving 27, now going up to 28 countries, with Croatia joining very soon. You mentioned briefly about the roles of the European Union being the regulator, laying down stringent criteria or standards in terms of directives and regulations, but I suppose at the end of the day, you would need a lot of help from the government at national level as well as the local level. I just wonder what is the specific help or assistance you've been getting from these various levels of authorities. And last but not least, given the fact that there are 27 EU member states or 56 in the United States of America, surely there are successful experiences, but how about those less successful experiences or episodes that you might like to share with us here in Hong Kong so that we can have a little bit more sort of comparative and balanced way of learning both success stories plus the less successful ones as well. So 3 general questions. Do forgive my ignorance and just ask you very big questions because I'm very interested to learn more about your experiences. And also, Chair, if I may, if our guests happen to have some information in any forms and you'd like to share with the panel, I would be very interested in having the information later on as well. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We would welcome any more further information in print or booklet format from you that could help us to further our understanding on incineration versus other types of waste management. And yes, our expert incentive at the very initial stage to persuade people to accept incineration.
Well, maybe others might amend to my comments. First, what motivates people to accept? Of course, we had our share of NIMBY as well. Even we had our share of bananas, built absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. That's more a British phrasing. Especially after we had this crisis in 1989 with one of the incinerators polluting the meadows next to and milk containing dioxins and so on. So the first new ones to be built right after it, they had some opposition, especially the one in Alkmaar. It's in north of the Netherlands, and where a lot of it's an agricultural area, and the farmers were afraid that these facility would harm their crops and their income and so on. So there were contracts signed between the initiator, the builder of the facility, and the farmers that if they would have any loss in their crops or quality, they would be compensated. Moreover, a lot of biomonitors were installed, very vulnerable plants for different of the pollutants. There was a committee installed with neighbors and farmers and so on who looked into the performance of this plant. So this plant had some lawsuits, but it was in the end it was built, it was constructed, and during the first years of operation, it was heavily, well, it was very critically followed. But in the end, so nowadays, I think this committee doesn't exist anymore in Alkmaar because nobody's interested. And these facilities, like the one in Amsterdam, they have a very open also attitude. They have staff specially employed for groups of school children and so on, and a lot of delegations from abroad, of course, to have tours on their facility. Not just the one in Amsterdam, but also all the other facilities do this, because this is you have to show it every day that you're doing a good job. So this first one was really the most difficult one, because it was built just and licensed in the period of the turmoil of this. So this one was. After this one, also these facilities learned that they start communicating with the NGOs and with the neighbors about these facilities before they submit an application for a license. So don't put them in defense, but start these negotiations and start the communication even before you submit the application. And that's the common way it's been done. And some of the authorities are thinking that these NGOs are taking over their position because they are negotiated between the NGOs, which have their own engineers who know a lot about these techniques. So before they submit an application, they have already reached a sort of agreement with the NGOs, and the application of license is more or less a formality. So that's one way to deal with it, to have a good communication, and I think Peter can have more about this, can tell more about this as well. About the European Union, one of the major pieces of legislation in Europe on treatment of waste is the new Waste Framework Directive, which urges that you meet 50% recycling of household waste, municipal waste, and 70% recycling of construction and demolition waste. Also that you have to reduce the amount of landfilling of biodegradable materials in the year 2016 or 2020, depends on the countries. They are only allowed to landfill 35% of the biodegradable fraction based on data of 1995. So in fact, because of growth in between from 1995 till now, it's a very small fraction which you are allowed to landfill of the biodegradable. So it's heavily stimulated by the European Commission and the European Union to move towards to divert from landfilling to increase recycling, and also to engage in waste to energy. And there are a lot of countries where I can show a graph of the European Union, and there are a lot of countries from Greece to Poland and Latvia and Lithuania and so on, and who have very bad performance, who still landfill 95% of their waste, so not meeting the targets. But these countries will face heavy fines, because when you're not meeting the targets, the Commission will start an investigation, and then you're sentenced by the European Court and you have to pay high fines. Also Greece, which has already some problems with the economy. So Europe is really looking into it and starts to stimulate. There's a difficulty with implementation of these guidelines, especially these directives, especially in the Eastern European new member states. But they're moving on as well. Poland, for instance, already has passed Greece in their waste management performance, and many other countries. So so the European Commission is stimulating this policy as well. Thank you.
Can I add something about community?
Sure.
Could we give the priority to the Professor families first? Because you raised your hand already.
Thank you very much. First, with regard to making the community to accept the place, there should be effort and expenditure on making the plant look very good. In Vienna, you know, the Spitalau project is done so well that it is now a tourist attraction. If you go to the web of Vienna and you say, what should I visit? They will tell you the palace and this, and then they will say the Spitalau incinerator. And if you go there, you pay, I think, something like €8 to go in. You know, it's a privilege. So spending, and it doesn't take much. In Milan, there was an incinerator to be refurbished, and there was a lot of opposition, and architects were brought in, and I think it cost an extra 5%. Which can be considerable, but they spend it, and now it's kind of a jewel in the particular area. This is, let's say, to provide, like you said, swimming pools. They're provided year-round, promenades, visitor center where the children can go. We have that in many U.S. waste-to-energy plants. We call them to distinguish the crematoria and other incinerators. Yeah. So that can be done. It can also be monetary privileges, where electricity can be made available to the community, which is more closer to there, provided at a lower cost. You know, another thing, the climate in Hong Kong in the summer can get very hot. So you could use the low pressure steam of the plant to provide cooling, to chilled water, which can be provided. It sounds difficult, but it's been done, for instance, in Brescia with district heating, cooling. The second question was, can the government do something? Oh, yes, they can do a lot, the government. And where we see in the United States more waste to energy is where state governments provided measures. For instance, call it renewable energy, like solar energy and some wind energy. Other states don't care, nothing happens. A good example with regard to the government role is China, the mainland China, you know, next door neighbor. That they have gone from 30 plants to 103 plants in something like 10 years. And how they did it? It's not because they put money there, but they provided certain incentives. For instance, one of the incentives, very good, is they provided a $30 equivalent credit for power generated from a waste-to-energy plant versus power generated from a power plant. That $30 can make a lot of difference. There's some other measures. Since you are a political scientist, I will send you a thesis of my student who is Chinese from Shanghai, who wrote a thesis about what are the measures that the government in China provided to help waste to energy.
Dr. Lee Potts?
Just to add a little bit more to what Herman said, really, but from a kind of UK context, what we found was each of the facilities, and when it's under development, we have these liaison groups during the construction phase. So people, members of the public, people who live nearby to the facilities were very much actively asked to come along and participate and find out exactly what goes on. And it was quite noticeable that during the construction phase, they do attend. And then during operations, we move into operation, they start to drift away because they realise, actually, this is not such a bad thing. It's a good thing. You know, it's positive. It does good things. And also on the visitor centre side of things, a lot of the facilities will have a full-time education worker who's normally a teacher, whose whole job is to bring in school classes, to work with local primary schools, senior schools, to actually do education around waste awareness, waste reduction, and kind of working from that perspective. It's always the best ways to work on the children, and that affects the adults, of course. So, and then a big part of the infrastructure cost will be associated with that visitor centre. And that visitor centre will have interactive things in there to actually understand kind of how waste management and reducing waste, etc., can have a massive impact on people. Also, the transparency in terms of information around the plant. In terms of the data, the view is that everything should be online, everything should be accessible, so that people can go online and get real-time data virtually to see how the plant, what's going up the chimney. You know, they know exactly what's happening, so they can feel comfortable in terms of how the plant is performing. And I think this gives confidence to people, and people realise that the plant is tightly regulated, it's very well performing, and it's kind of my plant, and my children can go there and they can get lessons about waste management, environmental things, and I think that kind of encourages and develops a kind of a completely different ethos associated with the plant.
And any more questions from members? Okay, in that case, I'll let me extend my thanks again to our expert group attending a conference in Hong Kong and kindly allocate this time slot to brief our members on your good practices and expertise. And definitely I would welcome the further information from you in any sort of format to help out better understanding on the incineration and other forms of waste management. So thank you again. Okay.